Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barringer. Another great episode, another great guest. We got George Briones of SOFlete on today. Get to talk about a little bit of training with the man. I've heard so much about you, so it's great to finally meet you, George. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate being invited, actually, and having the opportunity to come on and speak a little bit about the methodology and the principles and how we approach training the tactical professional. So I appreciate the time.
No, it's great to have you on. And then as we were talking a little bit ahead of time, it's kind of cool. Is George is from San Antonio, so
yeah, born and raised. I was out of I graduated from Thomas Edison, so down off of West Avenue in Hildebrand. Was there as a bear, and I enjoyed it. That was my home little local area, so it was really cool to kind of connect that way.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away everything because I like to hear it, from the individual. Now, after that, you went into the military, and could you talk about your military service and like what drove you to serve?
That's a really good question. I've had that question asked in previous podcasts and conversations, and I want to bring something a little bit different this time because of the fact that it's something that I've actually been able to evolve and pinpoint and kind of connect a lot of things to. And it came down to actually my grandfather. My grandfather served in World War II. And he was a tech sergeant in the Air Force. He used to, fly on airplanes and helicopters and go from base to base out in war zones and drop off engine parts, help work on them, do X, Y, and Z. So as a little kid, I guess I blocked it out. I couldn't really remember it. I ended up tapping back into a memory when I was doing a writing piece because I enjoy writing also. It's a creative outlet for me. I was writing about my grandfather, and it tied that in. It was like, oh, wow, that's the reason why I joined the military. Yeah, I went down this gnarly road of, X, Y, and Z of most what high school kids go through to learn, kind of become a man and move into the next thing. But realistically, what kind of made the seed grow was my grandfather. Him, being a tech sergeant in World War II, was really cool to kind of hear his stories when he used to sit there and tell them to me. And you take that stuff for granted until you've actually lived it, until you've actually experienced, like you said, your military experience. And for me, when I experienced everything as a Reconnaissance Marine, as going through boot camp, going through my MOS school, and then going through 1st Recon Battalion and becoming, a Recon Marine and doing X, Y, and Z, I look back at it and reminisce it. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, I can now start connecting some dots that allow for me to not, I guess, create a different worldview of what it was that got me into the military experience. In the past, it was like, I just want to leave Texas. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go join and do X, Y, and Z. And realistically, a buddy of mine invited me to go join, my buddy Nick. He was like, hey, dude, let's go into the Marine Corps. We're not really doing much here. There's this buddy system thing. So when we go to boot camp, we graduate together in the same platoon, which, by the way, was not the case. What was it, Black Friday? I'll bring it back. But Black Friday, we on the quarterdeck getting some extra PT in for being new guys, and I asked for permission to answer or ask a question, and the drill sergeant let me go, and I was like, am I gonna be able to stay in this platoon with my buddy that I came here with to boot camp? And the next thing you knew was in 5 seconds, in a blink of an eye, I had things being thrown out the third deck windows. I had my stuff being thrown down the stairs to the next platoon saying I'm kicked out, X, Y, and Z. So it wasn't really the buddy program. But to be honest with you, man, that set me up, that milestone, my grandfather's milestone, those 2 points really set me up to understand, like, wow, this is about me. This is about no one else. And I have to learn to kind of recognize that. And it takes longer than for others. And for me, it took a little bit. But that time period, when I look back at those 2 points of why I joined the military, was because of being able to have a companion going in, something that I had leaving Texas, right? And that's something everyone's from Texas. Texas is Texas. I'm born and raised from it. I love that place. It's my hometown. But I needed to disconnect to go ahead and learn and grow so that when I do come back to the area, in a very Native American storyline, if you can look at it from that perspective, I come and bring something back to the tribe. And then I can learn more from them, and then I get to go take it away and continue moving forward. And that's kind of the way I look at life in general. And that's kind of those 2 points to where I'm at today is kind of what allowed me to have a really cool storyline up to this point about my military experience.
No, that's awesome. And so you serve as this reconnaissance Marine. You do deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. you were instructor at the reconnaissance school.
Yes.
Was fitness always just because of the nature of your job always something, or was that a passion that was ignited post-military career? How did you get into like being a strength coach, really?
What's funny is I had that question asked to me from my daughter the other day. She's 10 years old, and she's starting to get to like want to know more about dad's past. So it's really cool for me to kind of unlock those doors, and those are the questions and those are the keys that help me do it. And I look back at it and I had to answer that question really well, because it was like, man, I would have never thought I would be sitting here as a professional strength and conditioning coach or performance architect, or however you want to look at it. And this is my living. Like, I'm doing this for my profession, like at all. And I look back at it, dude, and it was actually, I didn't start getting into fitness until my second deployment, actually, like really hard. I was always that guy that barely met minimums. I was always that guy that, whenever it came to a PT test or whenever it came to going to a school, I was always that nervous individual, because I wasn't sure. I guess maybe I didn't have the confidence in myself as much as I thought I did. Maybe it is because I didn't have the strength background as much. But I had been experienced to training in general as a middle school kid, playing soccer, football, shot put, track, you name it. And I got to be, kind of taken up under a wing of an individual who's like my second father. He's a mentor now. He still talk to him daily today. But he kind of expressed to me kind of what being an athlete was. But I think it was more if he was just showing me what it means to be a human and how to actually be a functioning one. So when I got into the military, it wasn't that it wasn't hard. It was more of like, oh, I just haven't done all this stuff. I can move, I can do pull-ups, I can do push-ups. I'm just not the greatest at them. I haven't lived my lifestyle in the gym. And then 2010 came around, we were doing our deployment in Afghanistan, and we were doing 90-minute plus hour, up to multiple hour patrols with 60, 70-pound packs on our back, dude, sometimes. And that was considered light, and having to jump over canals and having to do these very athletic characteristics that luckily I was taught at a younger age, but I hadn't trained it much. And what I started noticing was I was starting to break down during the deployment. I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well, I was taking Provisual, I was taking, I was doing all of these things that you're not told to do out here now when you look at it from a health standpoint. I was doing the opposite of that, and then still having to perform at a very high level, meaning I had to keep my head on a swivel. I still had to do X, Y, and Z. So about a month into our when we got back from our first op, which lasted 60 days straight, dude, we were out rucking with the pack on our back the whole time, house to house, doing KOLEs, you name it. And we came back from that 60 days and I felt really like junky. I felt like tight. I didn't feel myself. And a couple of my buddies are Sarks. They at that time period, Rodney and Finn, at that time period, they were doing CrossFit. So that's what kind of got me into the strength and conditioning world, was this idea of just being functionally be able to do CrossFit. I was like, cool, let's go do this. My first workout was Fran. It's this typical story. Like, he showed me Fran, but from there, what I got to really realize was that they weren't training CrossFit. They were doing high intensity workouts, but they were doing all of this other kind of strength conditioning type stuff around that. They were doing unilateral squats, hinging, all of these things. So I was already, I was like, okay, cool. These things are just being planted in my head. And then I started noticing I was able to perform on patrols better. This is in 2010.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the only type of individuals that are getting this kind of training are going to be a little bit higher tier 1 assets, because we understand, everyone says it, recon's not special operations, but I tell you, fuck you, excuse my language, sir. But we do everything just as much as a special operations unit does, and we can operate at that level. So we have to train and keep our mind at that level. And that headspace, one, we were in gunfights like crazy. We were actually in war. When we came back to Lebanon, where we came back to, it was a quick 1 week, 2 week refit, and you're back out for another 30, 45, 60 days living out of the land, doing your thing. So those 2 weeks was like a maintenance phase to like, all right, cool. I need to sleep well. I need to eat well. I need to go ahead and train my body. I need to, at the time, I wish we would have known to train our mind more, but I guess you can tie that in with physical fitness, if that makes sense. And pairing all that in together, dude, was really cool to kind of like look back at it now, and I can answer that question in a very full storyline that allows for you to be like, oh, that's really cool. Was what made me understand that I had to get into strength conditioning or performance training was actually I was at a point of life and death. I was on a ridgeline at 12,000 feet looking left and right. And it's like, well, if I keep doing these things and not implementing changes, how am I supposed to then be able to continue being an asset for my buddies to the left and right of me and keep fighting? So ultimately it was like, okay, cool. These guys are showing me something new. I'm going to go ahead and absorb it. this is just going to become the lifestyle. Very much like, martial arts, where a lot of people get into martial arts and it turns it into a lifestyle where they sleep, eat, breathe. All these things make them a better person. That's what the tactical athlete or the tactical professional is at that level now, on that ridgeline, being like, what do I do to like survive? So to answer your question, sir, it's a huge evolving sphere of experiences and lessons learned that have brought me to this point of like, man, it was that 2010 deployment that really kind of sparked my interest of getting into performance, because I had to stay alive.
That's great. And yeah, Leatherneck, that was Southern. That was like around Bastion, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so
that was not a nice place to be. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I can only imagine. Yeah, so 2010 was that tipping point. Now you kind of get into this CrossFit. Was that when you embraced the concept of the hybrid athlete? Because that's what you're known for.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, right. Now, right? So was that the beginning, or did that take some time as well to?
That actually took some time, sir. And I'm going to go ahead and say this straight out. Like, it's crazy to know, like, hey, people view me as this hybrid athlete or coach or whatever else, 100%. And it's taken me some time to get there. And I think it's taken me some time to get there from my previous experiences in the military. I served for 8 years. I had a lot of experiences in 8 years. And I look at my strength and conditioning career so far, and within my 8 years, I was known as this hybrid athlete. Well, what's funny is, like, when you look at a tactical athlete or a tactical professional who's at that level, what kind of athlete are they? They're a multifunctional, multifaceted athlete who can run, swim, bike, jump, play. They can lift weights. They can go fight people. They can do X, Y, and Z. And the mentality from the recon community is jack of all trades, master of none. The belief is like, hey, there's no such thing as mastery, right? Like, you can strive for it, but there's always more to know. So it's kind of the same way I kind of traveled that into my strength conditioning career. Was the same way. It was like, all right, cool, I'm getting into this CrossFit thing. I'm learning how to move differently. I started kind of playing around with CrossFit as I came back from that deployment. I'm not gonna lie to you. I actually told this to the wife the other day. It's like, babe, I used to sit down and watch for hours, because as an instructor, I was either on phase or I was doing other things. So when I wasn't on phase as an instructor for a tactical professional trying to raise up recon Marines, I was in a gym shadowing another coach named Jason Levine. And I would just sit there for 6-7 hours, dude, and just watch him. This was for a year straight. He didn't let me coach. He didn't let me do nothing. Just sat there and watched. I asked questions, did X, Y, and Z. I followed programming. I wrote programming, but it was like, okay, here you go. So I started understanding strength programming. I started understanding how to just kind of do these things, but just much like everybody else, by trial and error, sometimes you run into a brick wall. And within about 2.5 years of training that way, of, hard strength conditioning sessions, because again, I'm training in the mentality of, I got to go fight a war, because I had just came back from that. So that my headspace was that still, but realistically, my atmosphere of stress and I guess danger was no longer at a 10, it was now at a 1. If you think about it, I just didn't know how to dissociate between the two. So it opened the door to where it allowed me to, start experiencing different domains within the strength conditioning world and sports. So I started getting into CrossFit really heavily, try to compete at a high level. I made it to some local regional levels here, but then I started getting into the Recon Challenge, which when I was still an instructor, the Recon Challenge, and still goes on to the day. I was able to, go out and run a 30-mile ruck with my back and my pack, and fin and do all these things. And that moment was when I realized that I can actually do all of this. I can sleep well, I can eat healthy, I can do X, Y, and Z and still perform at that level. Now, that still wasn't the door that knocked me into ultra marathons, because that was like one of those things was like, that was painful and I never want to do that again. Why do people train this way? So I kept playing around with CrossFit, and then I got full-time into weightlifting. And I ended up moving into weightlifting and competing at the American Nationals. And I ended up taking multiple athletes up to international levels and masters, national levels for adults. I had a full-on team. I'd opened my own gym. It was a CrossFit gym at that time period as I got out after leaving the Marine Corps in 2014. So I was engulfed in it, dude. And I was just living that lifestyle. And, I was now CrossFitting. I was weightlifting. I had maybe done a little bit of running. I think I stopped running when I left the Marine Corps. So I hadn't touched it for a little bit. And then, about 2.5, 3 years into owning my business and doing this for a lifestyle, I was burning out. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, I don't know how I can keep doing this. Plus other mental health issues were coming from the growth of the experience that I had in the past. I had to start dealing with it. It wasn't the healthiest. So I was like, how do I fix this? So I sold my gym and I came full time with SOFlete. I was with SOFlete in 2015. I helped one of the first few guys that helped start the company. And dude, honestly, man, it was like, all right, cool. Well, let's look into ultra endurance running. I had a buddy who just got done doing a 200-mile race, and I was like, I can do that. And my mentor, who I had to mention earlier, Dennis, he was like, hey man, he was like, let me help you do this. Let's talk about it. Let's go ahead and kind of like see where we can go with this. So he went down his rabbit hole with his 30 years of strength and conditioning coaching, because it's not something he's done in the past. And it was like, all right, well, I'm gonna run down my rabbit hole with what I've done in the past. And it was kind of where it turned me into just understanding like, oh, I have to build an aerobic capacity. I have to be aerobically fit. Well, me understanding the nerd side of science and how the body understands stress, ultimately it didn't understand miles, it didn't understand elevation, it just knew time on feet. And luckily I was able to be put around some really smart coaches that introduced me to, Mark Twight, Michael Blevins, those two individuals who were doing some really extraordinary things in their time period and still kind of to this day, and kind of like challenging the way people think. And I'm a kind of person, that's who I am. And I think like it's who I love to be around is, hey, if you challenge me in a thinking process, it's going to go ahead and make me either want to go do it or not. And funny story is, our owner of the company was actually going to have us branch out and get another coach to come in to write our hybrid programming, because he didn't know. And I think he did this on purpose to make me go do it, because he knew already how I operated. And it's like, he's like, I don't know if you can. And I went and did it. So long story short, bringing it back, I started, getting into endurance. Mark Twight, started talking more with Michael Blevins and them, led me into, I guess, Scott Johnson, Steve House, those guys. It led me down into the mountain realm because I was living in the mountains. So I started moving in that realm, but I had worked around weightlifting coaches like Mike Burgener, Sean Waxman, Steve Gavin, Ursula, Spencer Arnold. I can throw all these names out. Caleb Williams, Kelly Williams, all these weightlifting coaches that are at their prime in their time that I was able to just absorb is so much information. Same thing in the CrossFit world. Early on, it was the CJ from Invictus, the Tinos, the Adam Rogers, the Max L. Hags, James Fitzgeralds, all these guys in their time where they were just throwing out all this information. I was just sitting there just absorbing it, because I had the time and I needed to apply it to myself as a tactical professional, but it also had to apply it to me now and the athletes I work with. So I got into ultra marathons. I started running and doing that. And I'm not gonna lie to you, my very first one was a 50 miler, fat ass 50-mile ultra marathon race. So what does fat ass mean? It means that you potentially only run with what you have on your body and you have to navigate the course yourself. So what perfect way for me to go from a tactical professional of learning how to land nav and do X, Y, and Z to go now do my first 50-mile race in this manner. By the way, I found it 6 weeks. I signed up 6 weeks before it started. So I had 6 weeks to get ready for this. Luckily, the past 7 months, I had just started incorporating swimming and biking. And then I started like building up my running, my time on feet. So it was a lot of brick work. It was a lot of like, hey, you're going to bike to run, run to bike. You're going to swim to run, swim to bike. A lot of the stuff I used to do in the Marine Corps, preparing for BRC or getting guys ready for BRC. And I remember how healthy I was then. I also remember, though, I wasn't sleeping well. I was also still partying with everybody, doing X, Y, and Z, and living that, sergeant lifestyle who just got back from 2 deployments and doing his thing. But when I started noticing was like, how do I apply now human functions? How do I apply sleep? How do I apply nutrition to this? Because it challenged me. I'm going to have to run for 24 to 30 hours at a time period. That 50-mile race I ran for 14 hours and I realized it almost killed me. I'm not gonna lie to you, my wife will sit there and tell you, like when I came up at the very 13:57, I had 3 minutes left to finish the race, dude. 3 minutes. And it was a 6-week buildup. So like I just did what I knew at the time period was periodization. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna run 4 hours this week, I'm gonna run 5 hours, I'm gonna run 6, I'm gonna run 7, I'm gonna deload, and I'm just gonna go run the race. It's all I did. And I realized it worked. But I needed more time in the back end to like build that time on feet to potentially not be so broken and finish the race it's a finished race, but finishing a race of 12 50-miler is actually really good, but that is when you start building experience time on. So yeah, dude, so going back to your questions, like how did I get to this point of the hybrid athlete, man? realistically, it's this jack of all trades mindset, master of none. I need to learn everything. Dude, I love movement protocol where I love Ido Portal. I love the movement culture work. I can move like that. I love sports performance. I love jiu-jitsu. I get to train one of the top #1 jiu-jitsu athletes right now, getting him ready for Worlds next year. And it's a totally different headspace. It's the same way as a tactical professional. I've worked with high-level weightlifters. I've worked with high-level CrossFitters. I've worked with high-level tactical professionals. I've had guys do really well at Best Ranger. I've had guys do really well at the Recon Challenge. And what it all comes from is from my own personal experience and actually living the lifestyle, right? It's like, hey, we're all humans. We're all the same. We just wear different jerseys. But if we can focus on these functions and we focus on understanding that these are just supplements that help us be better, dude, what happens to us? We level up and become Superman or Superwoman.
No, I love that. Yeah, I love that approach. I love the mindset of kind of becoming that supreme generalist and not having any weaknesses and just being a sponge and absorbing all that knowledge. And yeah, got a chance to be around Mark Twight too at one point, and right, yeah, totally different level. So I can appreciate that. One of the things though, you talk about Olympic weightlifting, and then you talk about ultra marathon running. And it's these two extremes, for me, kind of as a physiologist, dietitian, I'm thinking, anabolic and really catabolic. How do you balance both those in terms of programming? Like how do you, what does that yin and yang look like?
Man, it's taken a few years, dude, to like really kind of be able to actually discuss and have this conversation. Because at first it was me just throwing things at the wall, just like, and it was used on me and a few other early athletes that I have to this day, that either they're still working with me or like are still doing their own thing now, but are very influenced by what we've developed. And it took 3 or 4 years for me to figure this out. And what I found was that the cool thing, like you said, right, like, what I learned about weightlifting, it's very much more CNS driven, right? Like that's how I'm going to break that down. Very much nervous system driven. When I learned about endurance, so it's very more metabolic driven, meaning that the metabolic system is what drives your endurance. And if you don't understand how to navigate that, you're not going to be able to support here. But the crazy part is I always like to look for intersecting points. So with the CNS, what drives CNS? Metabolic function. And again, it's me just kind of like in my crazy headspace. Again, I'm trying to show this where it's like, cool, well then what is actually the primary piece that actually is going to drive CNS function, but also is going to improve metabolic function? Oh, endurance. Okay, cool. Well, as a generalist, and I'm not getting ready for a weightlifting meet, I'm not preparing someone for a world championship fight in jiu-jitsu. I'm not getting someone ready for the tactical games or someone ready for Best Ranger or whatever else. We're just your basic human being. Realistically, for us to live a healthy lifestyle, to improve heart health, to keep cognitive function there, we need to have a healthy metabolic system. And sir, you understand that from, you do this for a living. And that's what I really was like, okay, cool. I need to understand how to fuel myself more for these endurance events. So I ended up taking a whole approach of looking at aerobic work as my base function of nutrition. So aerobic work to me is just nutrition. That's how I look at it as. And then your weightlifting and strength work is your physical fitness, your physical education, right? And the reason why I look at that is because everybody should be able to go out for a walk for an hour. Everybody should be able to run. Everybody should be able to bike. Everybody should, and it has the capabilities. And when I say should, I understand life's not fair and certain things happen. But what I'm saying, if you have the ability to do those things, go do them. And they should be able to be done at 60 minutes all the way up to 9 hours, 10 hours without any issues. Now, we're not in that headspace anymore because of the world that we live in, which is why we do see a lot of, diseases and all the other stuff. So what I ended up finding out, man, it was like, okay, cool. I need to prioritize my aerobic work. That's always going to be prioritized. That's the thing that I want to look at no matter what. It could be your zone 2. It can be your nasal breathing stuff. It could be an easy walk. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to label, just understand aerobic work. But also, I'm getting a degree in sports psychology right now. I graduate here in a couple weeks with it. And what I've learned is that improving cardiovascular health improves mental health. So it was like, well, if I can improve this then pushes me here. At the same time, if I have a better mental health space, it's going to make me want to go ahead and want to do this more. So what I'm trying to get to is that aerobic work needs to be pleasurable, right? Because we're tricking the brain now. We're playing that push-pull game. So I just want it to be that. So what I didn't find out was there. Boom. Okay, cool. Now, what is the athlete missing on top from a strength perspective? What are their imbalances from a unilateral development side, from a bilateral side, from, multi-directional movement, trunk rotation, anti-truck rotation? Also, do they understand how to play? Meaning, do they know how to just move their body by jumping and twirling and doing? And I'm serious. I have adults do that, jumping and twirling, and that's something that I got to learn from Michael Blevins. Was like, hey man, these people need to move this way. They need to understand internal tension. And it's again learning that and being able to like foster and be like, okay, cool, I know my stuff. Let me tag this in. And from there, dude, it's now okay, cool. Now we know that if I can generally fix this here, I can then create an apex, right? And that's what I like to call it, an apex athlete, where I can then create this apex where when I need to specialize, I can specialize real quick, right? And then all of a sudden, when I'm done specializing, I can come back down. So it's knowing then where to go ahead and input your strength days. And then it's knowing to where to input your aerobic session, your nutritional days, right? It's knowing when like, hey, are we going to be doing a fasted 60-minute swim, bike, or run today, or a fasted 60-minute walk? Why are we doing that? Are we in season where maybe the fasting isn't the thing we need right now? We need to get your body used to intaking calories because that's what it's going to need. Or, hey, how do you, X, Y, and Z? This is when we start to like be a little bit more specific with our behaviors and our intentions behind it, right? And then as we get out of it, we come back that generalist again, where we're still specific with certain behaviors, but we can now take it a look and be like, all right, cool. We're not in the gym all the day, all the time no more. Maybe I'm in the gym twice a week and I'm out doing aerobic work 3 days a week. And maybe one of the days I'm out doing some kind of movement exploration session where I'm moving in different ways and I'm playing like a kid and I'm following that like dynamic systems theory, right? Of like learning how to build tactical creativity is kind of the way I look at that. And to answer your question, bring it full circle, sir, the idea and how I found this is being able to be very creative with the way you want to train, right? It's like, cool, you like to do kettlebell work, you like to do weightlifting, you like to do X, Y, and Z. Awesome. Well, why not do all those things? But also understand that you have to implement other pieces to allow for that to be able to do it. So if you just do these 3 things, you won't be able to do it forever. So I need to inject multiple different variables that allow for this to create adaptation so that this never becomes stale. It's the same way, again, when I look at a tactical professional, their primary job is to do X, Y, and Z. Well, then I need to throw in multiple variables that create this creativity and changes adaptation. The same thing with the professional athlete, or same thing for the human recreational athlete, the mom and dad, like that's the truth. That's all I look at that from. But at the end of the day, it's because of understanding that, hey, the aerobic system is my nutrition. And this here is going to be the apex that gets to move. I get to then control it, right? If I don't have if I don't have the aerobic system here to help drive my CNS, then my CNS is not going to last long. But it's also the same thing here is if I don't have my CNS to be driven, what happens to my aerobic function? It starts to peter away. That's kind of the way I look at that. So to answer your question, sir, I have a structure in how I do things 100%, but it all varies on the athlete. What are we trying to pursue? How many weeks is coming in? Their training history. I mean, what's their sleep, nutrition, heart health, psych state? You name it. There's a lot of variables go into it. And the question that I've always had to ask myself when I'm doing this is, how do I put this into an app? Because that's what SOFlete is, right? And then I work individually as well with athletes, and I also do some in-person stuff as well. And the idea behind it was realistically is just learning how to communicate this in multiple different manners. So then I can go and take, oh, sweet, this is how I get this athlete to become, the top shape to get ready for Best Ranger Challenge. Okay, cool. Well, the foundation for that looks very much like the soccer mom who is just wanting to weightlift, look good for her husband, and pick her kids up and do those things. That the foundation's all the same. It's just the apexes are all different, like a mountain range. There's all different peaks that we're all trying to reach. Some people reach them, some others don't. But that's okay. That's your peak. And you can raise it if you need to. So yes, sir. It's taken a few years to like kind of articulate that and understand that like, hey, I need to have this here as my primary of aerobic work. It needs to be my primary thing. If I don't have strength training for the day, I should have done something aerobically, meaning breath work, something where you get your heart rate up slightly to where it creates that. And then the same thing with strength work. So I don't know if you want me to break it down more, but that's kind of the whole philosophy behind understanding how to blend these two together and being able to do it again and continue following into that process.
No, I like that and understand. Yeah, you kind of have your general physical preparedness base, and then you're building on that. For the average soldier, what would that look like? Or are you saying if we're using like a 5-day-a-week model, would you say, yeah, 3 of those days you need that baseline aerobic GPP, and then 2 of those days are strength training?
As that could be a simple format, right? And let's go ahead and talk about that's your average soldier who is in shape, not overweight, and let's just call it a spade a spade. If you're not meeting the standards of military regulations, the 3-2 model might not be the right model. We might need to make adjustments, right? Meaning that, oh, cool, if you're a heavy body and you're in this position, you might need actually 4 days of aerobic work, 1 day of strength training. And a lot of people probably sit there and being like, wait a minute, what? Why would you only give someone 1 week of strength training, or once a week? Well, let's just be completely honest. First off, if there's someone that's overweight already, from a psychological standpoint, one, they don't want to work out. They don't want to do anything. So how do I make it pleasurable and enjoyable for them? So if I give them 2 days of strength work right away and their body's feeling sore, what happens to them? They become discouraged. They don't want to do it. But if I can go ahead and give them some aerobic work, be like, hey, look, as a leader, hey, let's go out for a walk today for 60 minutes. Let's go for it. Cool. All right, sweet. Hey, next week we're going to do this walk again. We're going to add 10 pounds to our pack. Now what am I training? I'm now training cardiovascular fitness. I'm training a little bit of strength training there. So realistically, he's getting a second day of training in of strength work, but from an external load standpoint of him just learning how to walk. Maybe the other days is some kind of like, hey, we're going to go hit the bike and we're going to do some strength. We're going to do some movement flow work, right? Again, teaching him to play again, or teaching her how to play again, teaching her to enjoy that fitness is for fun. And that's how I would approach the average Joe. And I think we're missing the mark with that, is that I'm not saying we go out and do soccer games and all those other things. No, what I'm saying is that we have more intent behind how we approach the average soldier and where their headspace is at, and why are they in that position of let's just say obesity, or maybe they meet the opposite way where they're just not eating enough and they're, other things are going on. We need to be able to take a dive into that real quick and then find a navigation pathway that allows for us to train them. And I know that's like, wow, that's really hard to do because that's from an individual basis. That's correct. But I guarantee you, I'll tell you what, it can be done on a multiple level standpoint. And it starts from the bottom up and the top down, meaning that we're doing this. A lot of people want to go top down aspect and bottom up. No, man, it's like we need both. We need all the lance corporals, we need the privates and everyone talking about it. But then we need officers like yourself, sir, who are like funneling this thing. And guess what ends up happening? What happens to diseases? You have 2 points of entry potentially, right? Or 1 point of entry, and they have an object and they're attacking it. It's the same thing here. We need to infest in it and just kind of ingest that to where, guess what ends up happening? It creates a cultural change. And that's what I see with the approach to, hey, what is a basic strength day for someone, or a week, or an aerobic day for someone, or for the week? Simple. What is it? What has their week been like? What has this been like? Cool. Maybe we manipulate the 3-2 this week. Maybe we just do 4 days of aerobic work because they need some more mental headspace stuff, and we do some strength work. We're still focusing on a push, pull, squat, hinge, you name it, all variations. And maybe that one training session where you can get 3 movements in of a primary movement, right? Squat, pull, hinge, cool, A2s, right? That superset can be some kind of, you get what I'm getting to, is hey, we can throw in rotation work, we can throw in mobility work, we can throw in power work, we can do whatever. Again, we're playing. That's all we're trying to do. No one needs to sit there and be very regimented. And I think, again, I understood that and feel like that's probably the right way forward than us sitting here and being like, you got to follow this program right now. You got to do this thing, because that comes after the infancy years of someone getting into physical education. That comes into like the adolescent time period. And that's how I kind of break down this approach to like, how do we approach the soldier or the task professional in general to do that?
No, I love that. And I was taking some notes because I love how you're talking about it. Hey, we need to make it fun. And I know even myself, I've kind of forgot that. And it's a good reminder of it's good to play. It's good to explore, and programming that in to have that. So I get that. Is like, hey, people aren't exercising because they don't think it's fun. We need to make it fun. What about your nutritional philosophy when you're working with folks? I'm a dietitian, so I'm curious, like, what does that look like? Do you have any special diet, or how do you approach nutrition?
So this is, I've approached nutrition in multiple different ways, man. Like back in 2015, I got to intern under Chad Wesley Smith, Dr. Mike Istrela. Jared Feather was also there in that group with me. And if you know Dr. Mike Istrela, he's part of the RP Reconnaissance group of guys. Jared Feather was an intern guy like me at the same time. We interned together under him, and he ended up going working for RP, and I ended up going to do my own thing, and working with SOFlete. And I'm going to go ahead and state this just from a respect standpoint. So I'm not a dietitian, not a registered. I will say that this is all just from prior experiences and stuff I've seen work with others and learning from individuals like yourself. I look at nutrition now in a very energy style way of eating, meaning that, hey, our body is this ball of energy. It consumes energy. And if we eat certain foods, it doesn't allow for us to soak up the energy that we need or expand the energy that we need. So for example, if I eat a Pop-Tart this morning for breakfast, what happens to my energy when I eat it? It starts to get sucked up because it takes longer to break down, correct? Like it takes longer to break the food down because of the ingredients that come inside of it. So it's processed, the gut's working a little bit harder to break it down compared to if I was to eat some eggs with avocado and some fruit. Now, what ends up happening is the energy used to break this down as much is less, meaning I have more energy to do other things. So that's how I view food at first. And something that I've really enjoyed and it's helped me actually not fall into this habit of like eating in a bad way, because I've been there. I've been a weightlifter. I've had to cut weight. Ultra marathon running, it's like being an ultra marathon is like how much food can you eat at a buffet, those kinds of things. But when it came back to the nutrition aspect, it was very much more. I found that I couldn't do all the carbohydrates. My body just didn't hack. And I've actually done this with a group of individuals in my gym back in the day. I was like, hey, I'm going to take 5 individuals and I'm going to do a study on high carb stuff. I had each athlete anywhere between 400 to 600 grams of carbohydrates a day. I mean, they were training twice a day. They were working too. They were doing X, Y, and Z. So I made sure their activity was supporting it. But what I wanted to see and happen was, what did their body do in terms of inflammation standpoint? And like at that time period, I didn't know it was energy or trying to figure that out. I was just trying to see what would happen. I did it with them. We found was like within like 3 weeks of doing that, 2 weeks of doing that, our bodies got really achy. And I was like, interesting. Fats wasn't that high at that time period. I didn't know how to navigate fats. But being able to get put through this internship with Dr. Mike Istrela, he starts to kind of share and explore this idea of carbohydrates are for activity, right? You're a carbohydrate for activity. Fats are focused around energy throughout the day, as well as, protein's going to be sourced for every single part of your meal. It's going to help build your body. It's going to help cognitive function. It's going to do all of these things. So what I ended up realizing was, all right, I need to go ahead and find a healthy balance on how to eat this. But I also can't be eating all the junk food that I used to eat when I was in the Marine Corps, the MREs. My gut's already jacked up. I needed to figure out ways to go ahead and reset my gut. So luckily, again, I got to work with a few other cool registered dietitians and learning and conversating, as well as exploring with this. And what I found was that if I can go ahead and eat more of a whole food based diet, right? Meaning that, hey, I stick to animal products, I stick to, veggies, I still eat veggies, but making sure that I eat them in a very healthy and for me, a way that I can digest them. So maybe getting rid of skin. My fats are really a big thing, right? Finding out like, hey, I need avocado, I need these types of fats to help drive my energy. Whenever I put in certain types of food, I become more aware of like, oh, it makes me feel this way. It does X, Y, and Z. So realistically, bringing that full circle, sir, my nutrition standpoint is that I need fat for daily energy. I utilize carbohydrates for activity only, and then I drive my protein to go ahead and help for daily hormone function, you name it, everything. Like I need protein in my system. If I'm not eating protein, then my body's going to go ahead and start weathering away. It's the kind of the headspace from that. I've gotten asked, do you do calories? Do you macro count? And it's like, I used to do all that stuff. I've had athletes do it in the past. But what I found was like learning how to just kind of change their relationship with food, and learning how to understand food is meant to drive energy, to give you more energy to do things. If we eat, a slice of pizza and a beer and, onion rings at the bar, just know that your gut's going to take longer to break that down compared to if I had a steak with sweet potato and that beer, right? You see what I did there? I still gave you the beer. I just was like, hey, here's this. Or we set some things up. The idea here is just to kind of be able to understand that like food is to drive you to do things and want to do things. If you're not eating enough, if you're not eating well, you don't have that energy. So that's ultimately the idea of it, sir, when it comes down to that, as nutrition. It's an emotional based response when we do eat a certain way, but we can also have the ability to have a logically based response to how we eat food. And if we can make that logically based thought process to eat food as the 80% and that emotionally based process to eat food 20%, you'd see some really, really good things from there. And again, micronutrients, minerals, all of those things, I'm really big into it. Have I gone down multiple different diets and everything else like that? I have, sir. I've done carnivore diet, I've gone vegan, I've done keto, I've done all of those things. And again, all of it came because I was trying to figure out what worked best for me. And what I came back to was like basic human function of how do you eat food, and all right, what's going to give me the most energy from that standpoint.
No, I understand the concept in terms of, if you eat something like a Pop-Tart that's broken down really quickly, you get an insulin response that might drive your blood glucose down, versus those egg and avocados, more of a sustained release, since it'll slow gastric emptying a little bit with that protein and fat. I get that. With supplementation, were you doing any supplementation, particularly for some of these big challenges you're doing?
Yeah, so I was using creatine, I was using beta-alanine, I was using obviously a protein. I was also using beet powder.
Mm-hmm.
I love beet powder. I was also putting in a bunch of, so either Element or Raylight. They're just sodium, potassium. What else comes into it? I think it's magnesium, and then they had some other stuff into it. So I usually take that. I'm a big fan of Redmond salt in my water. I like doing that as well, just for some brain function stuff. That was really big. And then tart cherry juice. I love tart cherry juice. Was my go-to. And you asked like, hey, what was the nutrition, like your supplements for that time period, especially pushing these big endeavors? I mean, cutting weight for a weightlifting meet to make a 94 kilos, because I weighed 220 pounds and I had to cut down to 204 in a 6-week time period, or running 100 miles, or being able to run with a ruck on my back at the same time doing X, Y, and Z, or being a CrossFit athlete, or getting ready for a jiu-jitsu competition. What I found with all those things was really interesting was the fact that, like, as long as I was able to train my metabolic system to utilize my macronutrients and micronutrients in the right way, again, in a healthy relationship, when it came to the race, I was able to handle eating anything I wanted. I was able to put as much calories in as I needed to, because what ended up happening was my body was like, oh, sugar, oh, glucose, oh, fat, oh, protein. And it's like at those time periods when I put it in, is again after big activities or during activities, and my body was just able to utilize it like super fuel. Dude, I used to put down Coke, and I actually started using Coke again. Put down Coke in all my races. Put down Coke in all my races, especially if I'm doing I did what was it? It was every 20 minutes you had to run a mile, or some stuff like that. And as the race went on, over the hours, they cut it down to, it literally went from 20 minutes all the way down to a 9-minute mile every 20 minutes. I made it, I think it was like a 15-mile race is how they did it. So I made it all the way to 13. And what saved me in that was when I hit mile 9, because mile 9 now I'm like pushing, like I'm holding 9-minute miles, 10-minute miles from the, like I not from the start, but when you get into it, and I was trying to figure out how to keep that going. So I saw a ultra marathon runner who had been doing this for some time now. I mean, they've been running 20 years, multiple 100-mile race completions for Western States, you name it. His name is Scotty Mills, and he was talking a lot about how he utilizes sugar at nighttime to keep himself awake and that. And I've been having issues in some of my races at nighttime with caffeine, and it was kind of affecting my races. So I was like, you know what? It's 3 a.m. in the morning right now. I'm gonna go ahead and start taking in Coke, and I started shooting down Coke and Mountain Dew for the race, and it snapped me back. And I was like, whoa. So that's now something that I still do today. And I even use a little bit of Coke for jiu-jitsu during it, actually, because of the higher anaerobic output that I'm doing. And that's been really cool to do. Again, I'm not saying go out and drink sugar, guys, or whatever else. And this is more of a performance aspect. But at the end of the day, what I found was like my body was able to break down these different types of macronutrients and minerals and micronutrients that my body needed at the time period, right? So it's one thing I kind of look at is I just want to be metabolically flexible enough to where my body can do that and still be healthy.
No, and that's a great point. And I even talk about this with nutrition classes or anything, is if you take somebody who's trying to lose weight and give them a performance nutrition class, it's not going to be very helpful. Same with if I take an athlete and try to give them, a weight loss class, it's not going to be helpful. Yeah, just closing that energy gap when you're putting out that type of output is all you needed to do, and maintaining that blood glucose with the simplest sugar you can get, like a Coke, might be that option. So I'm glad you discussed that. What about any resource recommendations for the average soldier out there who want to get more fit that you might recommend?
Book-wise, you're talking about?
Book-wise, or, it could be even website, it's just...
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, a lot of my resources and stuff like that were from, 2015, 14, 13, and 12. So someone they want to look into, and it's really cool to see social media today because it's growing really much. I'm starting to see a lot of the older coaches that I was under or learned from before social media was big, seeing them get recognition now. So one of those individuals would be Joel Jamieson. Yeah. I started reading, I was introduced to him by a coach named Adam Rogers, and Adam Rogers trains and coaches out of Training Think Tank up in Atlanta, Georgia area. So they're a big time CrossFit kind of company, but they don't approach their athletes from a CrossFit mentality. They're very much more a human function. Hey, this is what you got to do. And I really love their educational standpoint and the stuff they're putting out. So, Joel Jamieson, Training Think Tank would be a really good group. If they're learning, basic understanding of strength training, the good ones are, as simple as Super Training is a book, is a really good one. We can talk about Mike Burgener. He's put out some really good stuff on strength training. We can go ahead and look at, who else? We can look at Catalyst Athletics for strength training wise. I mean, you can't get away from Louie Simmons. Louie Simmons has done some really good things. And if you go read a lot of his old stuff, it's amazing. I mean, hell, I'm going to throw this out there. Some Dan John stuff. People probably be like, whoa, wait a minute, Dan John? Like, we haven't heard his name in a long time. But, like, there was things he was doing in the past that, still matter today. And I think if, the best resources to be able to go back and, like, just type in strength conditioning history. And I guarantee you'll find guys like Charlie Francis. You'll find guys, like Cal Dietz. You'll find, individuals that have like helped pioneer who we are today, to where you see the Vernon Griffins and the Nate Palins and the GB3s and the SOFletes and all these other things. You start seeing these guys out there. Well, we didn't come from nothing. Like, you have to go look at what we came from before that. And that's what I was taught from a lot of those guys, if that makes sense, right? Like,
no, I'm all about knowing your history. It's kind of like with, this kind of hit training and all like that. Percy Cerruti, I don't know if you know that name. Yeah. Was it Be Fit or Be Damned? And this Australian. He was doing all that. What, in the 60s, 50s? I can't remember. Yeah,
dude, it's crazy. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like, again, going back to my recon community roots, you have to know the history about what you're trying to get into, and if you don't, you have no clue trying to, like, I don't know, I might be mean by saying this, but you have no clue really trying to dabble in it. Like, if you really want to understand something, start diving down the history of it, because the history is what got us to where we're at. And the cool thing about the scientific process and, writing research proposals and stuff like that is there's a thing called the presentation of limitations, where we go in there and dive in and, like, get to go ahead and be super discreet in how we want to pull our own flaws out. And then we share it with the world that allows us to do what? I kind of looking at our history the same kind of way. It's like, what are the limitations that we saw here and how do we fill those gaps? Because, again, let's be honest, as a strength conditioning coach or as a performance coach or as a human being, my goal is not to create more solutions. I'm trying to create more. My goal is not to create more problems. My goal is to create more solutions. That's the plan. So history has a lot of those answers.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Hey, George, I really appreciate you taking the time today, talking. And one thing I want to, where can folks find you, reach you, kind of your social handles there, if you'll share those.
Yeah, so people can catch me at Briones_3 on social media for Instagram. I don't have a TikTok. I don't have a Twitter. I barely use my Facebook. I do have an email. They can reach me out. It's going to be george@soflete.com. It's that simple. If you guys are looking to get a hold of me about questioning in any of the tactical realm or any kind of performance aspects, please reach out. If you have any questions, honestly, too, about the thought processes and my ideas from things, please reach out to me and let's have a conversation. I've been around some individuals where, that's what helps us evolve. And I've learned that I have a very dynamic thought process in the way I explain things. So if I need to simplify it, please reach out. I love having those kinds of conversations.
No, hey, thanks so much for coming on, and I will see you, I guess, the end of August at the Tactical Strength and Conditioning. So George will be there. A lot of great people will be there. Get to talk tactical, all things tactical. So that'll be a lot of fun. I look forward to that. Hey, George, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you, sir. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Have a great day.